Is going on to all my You fans out there, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are here to break down and review You Season 4 Part 1 Episode 1, which is titled Joe Takes a Holiday. Now, the plan for this new season and this new Part 1 is to test out something new. I'll be individually reviewing each episode of Part 1, one at a time, with no spoilers of the further episodes. So the idea behind that is I'll be watching along with you all in hopes that you'll watch the episode and then come back to the channel and watch the review after. So any predictions or theories I'll be sharing will be based solely on that particular episode. With that in mind, all the links to the remaining episode breakdowns of this Part 1 will be available below in the description. With that out of the way, yeah, boy is a fan of this show. Now, at first, it started off as a guilty pleasure of mine, but over time, I'm a fan of the show. I also really enjoy seeing how the hell will Joe manage to get himself out of these murderous situations. And I've covered the previous seasons of this show, which you all can check out. I'm very excited to see how this all takes place and what's going to happen this time around, especially knowing that this is a Part 1 of a Part 2. So you got to imagine this Part 1 is going to end on a pretty crazy cliffhanger. Which, speaking of cliffhangers, I didn't watch the trailer for this new season because I already knew I was going to watch it. But saying all that to say, the reveal that happens in this episode really caught me by surprise. With that being out of the way, y'all, we got an episode to break down. Full spoilers ahead. As we're introduced to this new American professor teaching short stories, as a fan of this series, this is the perfect job for Joe, aka William, who goes by the name of Jonathan Moore, which we actually get the origin of where that name comes from a little bit later in this episode. We're introduced to one of the many new cast members of this new season who goes by the name of Malcolm, who's also a professor, but also an a-hole. Malcolm really wants to learn more about Jonathan and wants to hang out with him more, but we see that Jonathan's been avoiding him, and he's also not a fan of him. And Malcolm, we got a lot to discuss about him a little bit later. As we see, Jonathan, he's just right at home at London. He even says that the Brits are the most literary people on earth, and they respect their books. And we know how much Joe loves books and respects books. So he goes on to say that the LA suburban lifestyle was hell for him, and that London, once again, is just the perfect place for him. He just needs this place to be, to let his mind go, let his past go, and he needs this much needed holiday as he's adjusting to his new life and his new neighborhood, which is really cut right out of a Hugh Grant movie. We see Jonathan says he never wants to fall in love. He doesn't want to get involved in people's life. He just wants to focus on his books. Well, that's shortly lived because we see that he's living across the street from Malcolm, who also lives with his girlfriend, who goes by the name of Kate. And I'm telling y'all right now, I have a feeling that she's going to be very important to this new season. And yeah, y'all remember 2 seconds ago how Jonathan said that he won't be involved in people's lives? Well, that didn't last long because he is now invested in learning more about Kate. Now, we're going to kind of put this storyline aside and kind of focus on the flashbacks here for a second. And in the flashbacks in this premiere episode, we see Joe is searching for Marianne, and he finds her in France, which he learns that she was actually going to London for this art show, which explains why Jonathan found his way to London, because he was actually looking for Marianne. Now, he does find her, and let me know in the comments, for a brief second there, she seemed to smile, but that also could just be made up in Jonathan's head. She eventually runs from him, he catches her, and they have a conversation. Now, within this conversation, she's very upfront with him. You're a murderer, you killed my ex-husband, you killed your wife, and I'm honestly afraid for my life right now. Now, Joe is trying to play it smooth. He tells her, I'm not a murderer, and I'm going to prove I'm not a murderer. He lets her go. Now, if you've seen, obviously, the previous 3 seasons, this is only, really the second time he's let a woman go, the first time being Jenna Ortega's character, which I'm telling y'all right now, fingers crossed, I really do hope that they found a way to implement her in this new season, because obviously she knows about Joe, but also she's a mega star, and I'm a big fan of hers. But as I digress, we see that he lets her go. And the question I have for you all, will that come back to bite him in the ass a little bit later, as we see this mysterious individual is watching him? Now, we find out that this mysterious person goes by the name of Elliot. What a great name. He is hired by Ray Quinn, and he's hired to actually kill Joe. But we see Elliot has plans of his own, and he actually wants to work and exploit Joe. And this is where we see that it is Elliot that is actually the one responsible for giving him the Jonathan profile. But there's a catch with this new lifestyle, this new name, this new visa passport, and everything like that. In order to make this seem as Joe is dead, he has to go along with tying up loose ends. that loose end being Marianne, and we see Elliot is telling him he must kill her. So we're going to get back to that in a second here, but kind of focusing on this flashback sequence. Me personally, I'm very curious to see how the Quinn's going to play into this new season, whether that's Dottie or obviously the husband, but more importantly, Henry. Do you all think that we're going to get some scenes or get moments of Henry within this new season? Let me know your thoughts on that. And again, we'll get back to the flashback sequence when we break down the ending of this episode. But meanwhile, we see Kate is mugged, but Jonathan can't resist to help her, which he eventually does, but he does request that name is not brought up in the police report for obvious reasons. Saving Kate's life, Malcolm insists that Jonathan go with them to the most exclusive club in Soho, where he meets all these new privileged individuals. So breaking down these new characters, we have Penelope, who's an influencer. We meet her boyfriend, who goes by the name of Adam, who's actually the owner of this particular hottest exclusive club in Soho. We meet a Nigerian princess who goes by the name of Blessing. We have Simon and Sophie Sue. Simon's an artist and they both come from money, as well as Sophie. She's also an influencer. And then we also have like kind of secondary characters, Connie and Gemma, which we don't learn too much about, but I'm sure we will in the future episodes. But one character that I want to talk about for a second, he goes by the name of Reese. Now, Reese is a book writer. He's also the son of a duke, and he seems to have this shared familiarity with Joe and his backstory. So he's someone that Joe, or I should say Jonathan, connects with in this episode, and I have my eye on him. Let me know if you guys are suspicious about Reese in the comments. But as we see during this scene, I want to focus on two characters, and that is Simon and Sophie. We see when Simon is introduced to Jonathan, I found it interesting that he says, I have enough friends, but come back when one of them is dead. And he looks directly at Malcolm when he says that. And literally seconds later, when we are introduced to Sophie, Malcolm calls her a sociopath, and she nicely says to him to go screw himself and that she hopes that he dies. That is two members of the same family that wants to see Malcolm dead, and Jonathan notices that. I have my eyes on those two right now, and we'll talk about them here in a second. But Jonathan is given this alcohol. He's kind of going on this trippy journey, and we see Malcolm tells him that he should let the woman go who broke his heart and move on. And we see Jonathan isn't a fan of what he's saying there, which might lead to him thinking to what happens to Malcolm a little bit later, as we see him learning little bits and pieces of these new characters. And he also kind of gives a little bit of his backstory, what brought him to London. But it's important to point out another scene here, and I'm talking about Sophie. She tells Jonathan the following. Did he tell you he's royal adjacent? He dated the Middletons, and Malcolm is a liar. So again, this is pointing towards a member of the Sue family isn't a fan of Malcolm. And to me, right now, they're kind of my prime suspects because they kind of remind me of this kind of brother and sister duo, kind of like 40 in Love. We see Jonathan eventually makes it back home, but he passes out. He barely remembers what happens the night before, but he wakes up to finding a dead body in his flat, and it's no other than Malcolm with a knife in his chest, but also he has a finger missing, which I found to be very interesting. So you can tell how much Jonathan hated Malcolm because he literally didn't even flinch, didn't bat an eye. He didn't even seem to care that he had a dead body in Malcolm's body in his house. He really didn't like him. But I couldn't help, if I'm being honest with you all, to feel like this was kind of felt familiar. It kind of reminded me a little bit of season 2 where Joe believed that he had killed Delilah. So it kind of reminded me of that sequence there. As we see, Jonathan believes that he did this because, of course, he hated Malcolm, and he believes that he probably said something like when he was talking about Marianne earlier, that's probably what led him to dying. But he notices that he's missing that finger, and that finger seemed to have a pretty important ring on it. So my question is, who took this ring, and was it some type of trophy for this individual? As we see, Jonathan's going back to his old ways, and now he has to find a way to get rid of the body. As we cut to the scene of Cardi B playing in the background, and Jonathan has a half of a football game to get rid of this body, and we get one of the more bloodier scenes that we've seen so far in this entire series. As we fast forward to him getting rid of the body, he's having this conversation with Reese, as he's giving Jonathan words of encouragement to face his problems and to embrace everything for this road of redemption, which again, Jonathan still believes he's a good guy. All the things he did was for the right cause. And again, Reese being the one to tell him that makes me believe that Reese also has a dark past, and he had to find his way to redemption, and I can't wait to see what those moments were. As we wrap up this first episode, we end with seeing Jonathan going back to that flashback. He is tasked with killing Marianne. Does he do it? Of Of course he doesn't do it. He loves her, but he does take her necklace and he takes a picture of it, pretending to have had killed her to give it proof to Elliot. Now, I'm going to be honest with you all. If Elliot is some type of badass hitman, just taking a simple picture of someone's necklace seems to be a very silly way to confirm you killed someone. So I am to believe Elliot won't believe him. He's going to probably try to attempt to kill Marianne, and I think that might be a plot that we can explore. Let me know your thoughts on that. As we end with seeing Kate, who is slightly concerned that Malcolm is missing, but she also doesn't seem that concerned because it seems like that's something that he does on a regular, as she invites Jonathan to this dinner date, which Penelope actually wanted to see Jonathan there because they had a very good connection. And we see Kate does reveal to Jonathan that she didn't tell the police that she was helped out by him in the mugging. As Jonathan arrives to the party, he receives a message from a very high security app from a stranger, and this stranger is impressed by his actions, and they go ahead and kind of reveal themselves as, if not the killer, they were probably involved with the killing of Malcolm, who we see wanted to put the blame on Jonathan. So we end the episode at the table with all the other privileged new characters, and Jonathan puts the question out there, who was the killer? So again, just got briefly going over my suspects right now. I have the Sue siblings being my main suspects just because, again, they give me that 40 and love vibes, and I think they might have something to do with it, especially them mentioning that they want him to die. But then also that Reese character. He seems to have a dark past that tie into what Jonathan, aka Joe, might have done. I'm very intrigued to learn more about him because he also seems to be kind of the odd man out. Every one of these rich, privileged people seem to be a-holes, but he seems to be really grounded. So I'm very curious to see what is it that got him attached to these people. So Reese is someone else, but I also can't ignore the power couple, Penelope and Adam. They seem like a Joe and Love 2.0. And then lastly, Kate, someone that seems to be so disinterested in Joe, or I should say Jonathan. You can't trust him. I think she has some dark secrets. I think she has some things that she's hiding. So overall, I thought this was a solid way to return to this new season, having Joe now being used as his toy with this killer slash stalker and him being kind of like a Sherlock Holmes meets Dexter. I'm into that. Very much enjoyed this episode, and I'm very excited to see what happens next. Like I said up top, this is just me watching the first episode. I'm ahead and going to watch episode 2 now. Very excited to give you all my thoughts on that. So just a friendly reminder before you all check out of this video, hit the thumbs up, share your thoughts after watching this first episode, your theories on who you think the killer is, and of course, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and like I said, my episode 2 review will be available as well as episodes 3, 4, and 5. You all have been awesome. Hope you're staying safe. As you all can see on the screen now, come and join the community. Check out my review for episode 2. Check out my playlist for this new season. We'll catch you all on the next breakdown.